This is my 94th birthday. I'm very honored to be able to sit and talk with my brother Bob Lott and Wesley Brown on the book, which is entitled No Man Cannot Hinder Me. The title is taken from a spiritual that our fathers and mothers created on the plantations of the South, which started off with Ride On King Jesus, no man cannot hinder me. And I just took that excerpt because my life is an example of having no man that could hinder me. The book is really a series of stories creating an idea that white people don't like black people. And my story started when I was very young, and I just couldn't understand it. I remember Harry Hiller in my first grade, and he and I were good friends, and one day he says, I can't play with you anymore, Ed. I said, why? He said, because my mother said I can't play with colored boys anymore. And I said, why? He said, because you're colored. So I went home and asked my mother, what has that got to do with anything? He said, when you get older, you'll understand. I found out that it's because of their being brainwashed against our African ancestry is the basic reason why white folks dislike black people. I call it intrinsic value. Let me give you an example. Bill Russell, a great basketball star, was considered one of the most outstanding basketball players of his time. And when he retired, they gave a great celebration for him on a Monday. Boston, his home city, rolled out the red carpet for him. And he was loved and adored by white people all over the city. That was Monday. On Thursday, these same people were going to bomb his house because he moved into a neighborhood that did not allow black people in it. Now, to most people, that is so ironic. How can you be loved on a Monday and on Thursday hated? And the reason is that he was of functional value as a basketball player. We call it extrinsic value. But when he moved into a neighborhood where they lived, they hated him because they disliked his ancestry. We call that intrinsic value. I came to the conclusion what the problem was and what the solution was. Let me give you a couple stories to illustrate this dislike. In my book, No Man Cannot Hinder Me, I used story after story showing this dislike of white people for black people. Now, one of them has to do with when I was in the Army. And I was a volunteer in the United States Army in the Second World War. As a consequence of that, I could choose the part of the armed forces I wanted to be in. And I wanted to belong to the Army in the Signal Corps of the Army. As a result of that, joining 98 more soldiers, including 2 more African Americans, we were ordered to take 100 German prisoners across the country to a prisoner of war camp in a place called Camp Gruber. As we got on the train, the 200 of us were there, the 100 German prisoners and the 100 American soldiers. We talked with each other, those who could understand English and spoke German. The trip was uneventful until we stopped in Claremont, Missouri, home of the late humorist Will Rogers, for a lunch break. I'm reading from the book. The trip was uneventful until we stopped in Claremont, Missouri, home of the late humorist Will Rogers. We lined up the prisoners, still shackled, in front of a restaurant that had been commandeered ahead of time by the army. Several white soldiers went ahead of the prisoners. The remainder marched alongside to prevent escape of the prisoners, and we 4 black soldiers brought up the rear. When the restaurant owner saw the 4 of us black soldiers, he went into a frenzy. "No niggers, no niggers," he screamed. He couldn't even speak English well. And they're not allowed in here. The Germans shriveled around, jeered our presence, and began calling us Schwarzen. Schwarzen means niggers in German. And these German prisoners who pledged their allegiance to Adolf Hitler had found 4 targets at which to spew their master race venom. With equal contempt, the owner announced, if the Negroes want to eat, they will have to go out into the freezing February rain in the back of the restaurant, where someone will make them some sandwiches to take out. Meanwhile, the German prisoners and the white soldiers sat in the warm, spacious dining room enjoying their meal. We black soldiers were so angry that a bitter taste still surges to my throat even today, 70 years later, from that humiliating experience. Now, we're going to change that. We're going to change that hatred of our African background. Now, the reason why we love whites is for 2 reasons. Number one, everything, ever since we were children, valued white. Every word in the English language, speaking of white, is a positive word. That's one thing. The other thing is motion pictures and all kinds of commercials show whites in a very positive light. And on the other hand, shows black in a very negative light. We call that by a name, a psychological name, called we'll come back to that. Another instance that I have was when I bought a home in West Philadelphia. Oh, it was a beautiful place, and I loved it. What I did was I found that the white people in the neighborhood didn't want any blacks moving in there because they hated us. And I got a white person to stand for me when we went to the agency that was selling the house. It was on 55th Street. So I got a white friend of mine to go for me. And the result we bought the house. When they found out that it was black people that bought the house, they sent all kinds of threatening letters, what they were going to do to my family. I had a wife and 2 children at the time. One day I dressed up in my army uniform and took a broom and wrapped it in brown paper. It looked just like a rifle. And I walked out on the porch and I stomped the porch. And I said, anybody that comes on my pavement will get it between the eyes. And I'm a sharpshooter from the Second World War, which I went into to protect you all, you white folk. Well, from then on, every white person that came down the street, when they got to my pavement, they walked out in the middle of the street, they wouldn't put their foot on my pavement. I thought that was very humorous, because they were afraid of what I would do. Now, things changed. And you would say to me, well, things are different now. You can go places and eat in restaurants, and it's different now. Only because we made it different. We protested. We had laws passed. You all didn't have to have any laws passed to be able to eat in restaurants. Everything that we got from America, we fought for and shed our blood for. It's a different thing altogether. We are enjoying these things, not because of your kindness, but because of our militancy. Now I want you to understand that. Now the book goes into the solution to the problem. It lays out that the problem is that the total society has been programmed, that is brainwashed, by the media of communication to despise our African ancestry, to despise everything coming out of Africa, to despise our looks that come out of Africa, to despise our beautiful history. They have no idea of the beauty and the grandeur and the sophistication of the Songhai Empire or ancient Egypt. And that has to be corrected. And it only can be corrected the same way it was hurt, where it hurt us in the first place. And that's through subliminal impact of motion pictures. And that's what we're going to do.
A couple of questions. Tell me what it is I'm going to get out of reading your book. What am I going to get out of reading?
Hope. I don't know if you are aghast and thoroughly disgusted at blacks killing each other. I don't know if you are thoroughly disgusted and hurt of how many blacks are going to jail every day. I don't know if you are upset by blacks leaving their families and their children to fend for themselves without taking care of them. The book is going to show how we're going to correct all that. Now, most people may not be interested in correcting these ills, which I call disproportionate ills. But I am. And I believe that we will be able to correct all of these disproportionate ills and diminish to proportionate levels the ills which we suffer as black people in the world. Another thing from reading the book is humor. You'll find a lot of things which are humorous, and even if you don't want to read it for the philosophical, substantive portion of it, you just read it from a humorous point of view. The other thing is, it's easy reading because I made the fonts big enough and the chapters short enough so it doesn't weigh you down philosophically, what we're doing. So that's what we think the book has as its advantage. The word I was trying to think of at the time is paired associate learning. Now let me tell you what paired associate learning is. When you put a person of a certain color in a picture and associate that person of that color with beauty and grandeur, with wisdom, with beautiful surroundings, with outstanding scholarship, with people bowing and scraping to that person, then that person becomes beautiful. If, on the other hand, you show a person in a criminal lineup walking with his head covered over with a hoodie, walking with police behind him and he's handcuffed, walking into a prison, then we say, you have been programmed by paired associate learning. P-A-L, paired associate learning. Now, let me tell you the reason why. Let me tell you. And the book goes into it. Why is it that the powers that be, and I'm going to tell you who the powers that be are, that the powers that be do not want our children to learn what all white children learn. All white children learn of the greatness of their European background. It's taught to them directly. But there is a national prohibition against teaching all children the greatness of our African background. Why is that? Well, a teachers' union said the reason why that we're against black children learning about the greatness of Songhai and the greatness of ancient Kemet is because it will make the academic playing field level. And anytime black and white are on a level playing field, blacks dominate. We're not going to have blacks dominate in academia, that is, in academic pursuits. I think it's deeper than that. I believe that there is a $1 trillion project that is being projected by the powers that be, which we call the industrial military complex, which is made up of the top corporations and the top military people at the Pentagon, who dictate to the president how to run the country. It's been known for years and years that they're the powers behind the throne. The president sits on the throne. John F. Kennedy bucked the industrial military complex, and they wiped him out. His brother, Robert, bucked him. They wiped him out. And as of today, they don't know who did it. Why? Because it is shrouded in this secrecy of the industrial military complex. 99% of all people, and 99.5% of all black people, have never even heard of the industrial military complex. But we believe that they have a program of building a $1 trillion project of prisons. And they have to have people going into the prisons. Guess whom they have chosen? They have chosen our people. And it is against their rules to have those children growing up knowing the beauty and grandeur of their African ancestry. This is why Dr. Malefi Asani can't get it done in Detroit. My brother in Washington, D.C. can't get it done. I can't get it done in Philadelphia. And guess what? They've paid money to have it written, and they wipe it out. It disappears. Now, anybody with any common sense knows that it has to be a national conspiracy for that to happen for a reason. And I say that Imhotep, I believe in my communion with Imhotep, is that it's the project of building this $1 trillion project of jails and black people to go to jail. I believe people of all races should buy this book for a number of reasons. Number one, they're going to learn something they never knew before. They're going to learn about a growth in every human being's brain called the amygdala. Most people have never heard the word before. Now, the amygdala was put into the brain of every human being as a survival technique developed by nature to shun and to run and to fear anybody who didn't look like their parents. It even reaches a point it not only want to shun and run away from, but to eliminate people who don't look like their parents. They're going to learn from this book that there is a second growth that came about 100,000 years later after the first growth, which can suppress the first growth. It's called the prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex can reprogram the amygdala where they will not fear someone who doesn't look like their parents. Now, this is something that you're going to learn from the book, and why it's important for you to know that, and why it's important for you to know the reason for blacks loving whites, since they have the amygdala also. But they have been programmed from babyhood, younger than 36 months old, to love white. From this book, you will learn the three things that comes when our children learn the greatness of their African ancestry. Number one, they're going to increase their academic performances. Number two, their behavior is going to become extremely positive. And number 3, it's going to enhance the respect of others, other races, for blacks from this book. This book shows how it should be done in order to accomplish these 3 things. And it'll be done through motion pictures, through what is known as subliminal impact. That's what this book will show. But not only that, the book will diminish the disproportionate ills from which all black people of the earth suffers. That's what this book will show. You say, well, how can you incorporate that in 200 pages? Through a device which is known to man, that Jesus proved that when you tell it in story form, it impacts most tremendously. And that's what this book is, a series of stories.